The twin suns of Zarnuk Prime scorched the slave markets below, where heat rose like steam off rotting metal and filth. The air was thick with smoke, grease, and despair. Traders barked their prices, muscle-bound guards shoved the weak into line, and buyers drifted like carrion birds searching for meat. Jari stood at the very end of one such line barefoot, trembling, her wrists shackled together with oxidized steel. Her once lavender scales had faded into pale gray from malnutrition and abuse. Her golden eyes, once sharp and vibrant, were now hollowed windows of someone who had stopped expecting mercy long ago. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't flinch when the auctioneer barked insults at her dot. She was just another object. A number scrawled on a rusted placard around her neck. Lot #384. No one cared that she'd once been someone important. A diplomat's daughter on the crystalline world of Sarakai, fluent in 5 languages, educated in law and diplomacy. All of it meant nothing now. She was Yulari, slender, delicate, and to the Zarnok elite, the perfect blend of exotic and disposable. That made her a prized item once. Now, she was just trash, too weak to lift a box, too defiant to break properly. The auction began, and stronger specimens went first. Massive Durak males bred for heavy labor, sleek Phalari dancers who fetched high prices for pleasure houses. Buyers jeered and bargained like they were haggling over produce, not sentient lives. When it was Jari's turn, the auctioneer sighed, almost embarrassed to bring her forward. Lot number 384, he grunted. Old. Yulari stock. Used to be useful? Now? Bah. Skin's dull, barely speaks, and might collapse if you make her stand too long. Start the bid at half a token. No one raised a hand. Scrap camps'll take her, someone muttered. She might last a week on garbage detail. 2. Small for labor, too wild for pleasure, another said, snorting. What a waste. Jari's knees wobbled. She waited for the order to move back to the cages, or maybe to be dragged away for recycling. It didn't matter. She'd learned to stop hoping long ago. Then the crowd shifted. Whispers stirred like wind through dry leaves. A ripple of discomfort passed through the buyers. A human had entered the square. He walked without fear, tall and broad in black fatigues, his expression unreadable beneath a short beard and a scar slicing through his right eyebrow. His gaze scanned the line of slaves but didn't linger on the strongest or the fey. Prettiest. He walked straight to Jari. The auctioneer blinked. That one? You sure, off-worlder? She's barely functional. The human ignored him. How much? He asked, voice low and clipped. She's not worth. How much? The auctioneer stammered. 1 token. Full price. But you're wasting your... A credit chit was tossed onto the counter. Done. Before the auctioneer could protest, the human stepped forward and gently unlatched the chains from Jari's wrists. She flinched violently, expecting a blow. Or a collar, but instead, he pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it startled her. More than anything, he knelt slightly to her eye level. You're not a slave anymore. Jari stared at him, lips parted, throat too dry to speak. Her eyes searched his face for deception, mockery, or hidden cruelty. There was none. The human Elias Thorne stood, offered her his hand, and said, quietly, let's go. She didn't move at first. Couldn't. It wasn't just disbelief, it was fear. Fear that this was some cruel trick, that she'd be punished for even hoping. But something in his tone, something in the way he didn't grab her, didn't bark commands or gloat pierce through her defenses. Her hand, slow and trembling, reached out, and for the first time in years, someone held it like it mattered. As they walked out of the market. A hush followed them. No one stopped them. No one dared question the human. Not here. Not with that look in his eye. Behind them, the auctioneer muttered, Crazy Terran. throwing away credits on garbage. But Jari, still silent, still overwhelmed, wasn't garbage anymore. And deep inside, something long buried stirred. Jari didn't speak for the first 6 days aboard the Valkyrie. She sat curled in the farthest corner of the medical bay, knees tucked to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The oversized jacket Commander Elias Thorne had placed over her shoulders still hung from her frame like armor. She hadn't taken it off, not even to sleep. It smelled faintly of metal oil and something else, something warm, human. Every time someone entered the room, she would flinch, eyes darting like a cornered animal's. The Valkyrie's medbot scanned her silently every cycle, logging dozens of untreated injuries, cracked ribs, torn ligaments, signs of past electrical shocks, and advanced malnourishment. She refused painkillers, refused food for the first 2 days, refused water unless it was left beside her and no one was watching. Elias didn't force anything. That surprised her more than anything. He checked on her twice a day, never looming, never touching. He always kept his voice calm, low, and brief. I brought food. You don't have to eat. Just wanted you to have it. Medbot says your fever's down. That's good. I've set privacy locks on this room. You can override them whenever you want. She didn't respond. Not verbally, but she listened. By the 3rd day, she began eating. Just enough to keep her stomach from twisting. On the 4th, she used the sanitation unit and even returned to the bed on her own, no longer sleeping on the cold floor. That same day, she found herself watching Elias through the slightly open door as he passed. He moved like no one she'd seen, efficient, aware, unthreatening. Not once did he raise his voice to anyone, not even the malfunctioning maintenance droid that nearly set the kitchen ablaze. On the 6th day, Elias brought something new, a datapad. He set it on the edge of her bed, careful not to crowd her. No rush, he said. Just some information about the ship, about me. You can erase it if you want. Then he left. She didn't pick it up for hours. When she did, her hands trembled. There were no threats, no surveillance warnings. Just simple files, crew manifest. Just Elias and 2A ship maps, emergency procedures, and a short log. Commander Elias Thorne, Terran Federation, Special Recon, retired, mission, none assigned, currently independent operator, medical certification, field medic, trauma response licensed, psychological profile, stable, empathetic, caution recommended, veteran of multiple conflicts, personal log, picked up someone the galaxy forgot. Let's see if I can help her remember herself. She read that line 5 times. Help her remember herself, not fix her, not use her, not break her in. Help. That night, as the stars drifted slowly across the viewing dome above her bunk, Jari sat in silence, gripping the datapad like a lifeline. Her mind was chaos. Memories flared behind her eyes, screams, chains, loss, her mother's final whisper before the slavers dragged them apart. And now, this, a human who didn't want anything. A room with no chains, a ship with no locks, a voice that never barked orders. She didn't know what to make of it. On the 7th morning, Elias was seated in the small common area, sipping black coffee and flipping through reports when he heard soft footsteps. He looked up. Jari stood in the doorway, smaller than he remembered. Wrapped in the jacket he'd given her, arms folded protectively, she said nothing. He said nothing. After a few moments, he gently pushed a second cup of coffee toward the edge of the table. I don't know how you take it, he said casually. Try it. If you hate it, I'll never make it again. She hesitated, then slowly walked forward and picked it up. She didn't drink, just held it close. Elias didn't watch her like a therapist or a commander. He didn't ask probing questions. He just nodded and returned to his reports. After nearly 10 minutes of silence, Jari whispered something so softly he almost missed it. "Why did you buy me?" He looked up. "I didn't buy you," he said. "I bought your freedom." That answer made her breath hitch. She looked down, her voice shaking. "They said I was trash, broken." He met her eyes firmly. They lied. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was healing. For the first time in what felt like centuries, Jari exhaled, not from pain, but from the smallest flicker of peace. Jari was no longer just surviving aboard the Valkyrie. She was living. It had been nearly 2 standard months since Commander Elias Thorne bought her freedom on Zarnok Prime. She no longer hid in corners or flinched at every footstep. She walked the ship's halls with purpose, ate meals at the same table as Elias, even began to smile, not often, not fully, but enough to suggest that the broken pieces inside her were starting to reconnect. Elias never rushed her, never expected anything more than she was ready to give. And that patience, more than anything, earned her trust. She started reading again, devouring information languages, ship systems, Federation protocols. The datapad rarely left her hands. When she asked to observe the ship's operations, Elias handed her access codes without hesitation. When she asked to learn hand-to-hand combat, he trained her without condescension. And when she asked to fly the ship, he simply said, "Show me what you've got." And she did. She had a mind for tactics, for precision. It had been buried beneath trauma, but it was still sharp. Still hers, Elias noticed. He always did, but it was. On a routine supply stop at a neutral Federation outpost that everything changed. The station was orbiting Epsilon Threx, a refueling hub, trading post, and minor diplomatic junction. Busy but safe. Or so they thought. Jari had come down to the surface with Elias, wearing a simple tunic, her posture alert but not afraid. They walked the market side by side, gathering supplies, refueling the ship, taking in the colors and noise. That's when she saw them, Zarnuk traders. Slavers. 3 of them, tall and wide-chested, wearing their bone-marked armor and sneering with the kind of arrogance that came from years of being untouchable. One of them, Vexzeran, was a face she could never forget. He had owned her, hurt her, broken others in front of her just to watch her squirm. And now he was here. At first, Jari froze, panic rising like acid in her throat. Her hand reached for Elias's sleeve before she even realized it. Her breath caught. Vexzeran saw her, his lips curled in a cruel smirk. "Well, well," he said, his voice like grease sliding over a blade. "I know you. Thought we dumped you in the back alleys already. Who picked up this trash?" Elias stepped forward before Jari could speak. "She's under my protection," he said evenly. "Walk away," Vec laughed. "Human, is it? Cute, but she's ours by trade. A runaway stolen property, technically. We can file claims." Elias tilted his head. "You think I care about your paperwork? She's ours." "No," Elias said, stepping in close, tone shifting from calm to lethal. "She's not." Vec reached for her quick, aggressive. Without warning, he never touched her. Elias's punch was so fast it cracked across Vec's face before the slaver could blink. Bone crunched, blood sprayed. Vec dropped to the floor like a stone. His companions moved, but Elias was faster calculated. Brutal, efficient. A leg swept one off balance, and the other caught a fist to the gut that left him gasping. Within seconds, all 3 were on the ground, groaning or unconscious. Jari stared in shock. Not at the violence, she had seen far worse, but at the fact that it had been for her. Guards rushed in, weapons raised, but stopped when they recognized Elias's Terran ID. The slavers were detained. Jari's record was clear. No charges were filed. Back on the ship, Jari sat in silence, clutching a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Elias stood nearby, knuckles bruised, wrapping a bandage around his hand. "You didn't have to do that," she finally said. "Yes, I did. They would have stopped eventually. You didn't have to hit them." "I didn't hit them because I was angry," Elias said quietly. "I hit them because they looked at you like you still belonged to them." She looked up, her voice cracking. "I was so scared." "I know, but you didn't run." Jari blinked, realizing that was true. "I wanted to," she whispered. "But I didn't." Elias leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Because you're not that person anymore." Jari set the mug down, stood, and met his gaze. "Thank you." Jari was no longer just a freed slave. She had become part of the Valkyrie. Elias hadn't planned on having a co-pilot or a partner in command. But in the weeks following the incident on Epsilon Threx, something changed. Jari had begun to speak with confidence. She stood straighter, no longer shrinking into the corners. Her eyes, once vacant and wary, now sparkled with focus, intelligence, and fire. The crew may have only been two living beings and two AIs, but the dynamic had shifted. Jari wasn't just a guest anymore. She was the ship's second in command, in all but title, and Elias wasn't coddling her. She didn't need it. She'd grown sharper than he'd expected, and fast. She learned the Valkyrie systems inside out: navigation, communications, and even engineering. Her curiosity was endless. Where others might have fumbled through training, she absorbed everything, her mind hungry for purpose. One day, during an unexpected plasma storm in the Margan Expanse, the Valkyrie was caught in a flux surge systems. Faltering, reading, scrambling. Elias rushed to the bridge only to find Jari already in the pilot's chair. She was calm, hands flying over the controls, calculating trajectories, venting plasma lines, correcting pitch and yaw with a confidence that stunned even the ship's AI. Elias stood back and let her work. By the time the storm cleared, the ship was intact and stable. She turned to him, breath steady, eyes wide but proud. "I figured it out from your training logs," he grinned. "You didn't just figure it out, you saved the ship." From that day forward, she was the one plotting hyperspace routes, negotiating docking fees, and running tactical briefings for their occasional contract missions. What once began as her observing silently had become leadership in action. Elias even began taking a step back, only guiding, never overshadowing. One afternoon, after a successful supply escort mission, Jari found herself standing on the bridge while the rest of the crew celebrated quietly in the galley. She looked out the viewport, watching the stars trail across the darkness. She hadn't thought this was possible. Not for her. Once a slave, treated like property. Broken. Now, here she stood, confident, capable, and free. It still felt unreal. Sometimes. Elias joined her moments later, setting 2 glasses of dark Terran liquor on the edge of the console. "To your first solo command," he said. Jari smiled faintly, accepting the glass. "I didn't expect to feel this proud." "You should." He leaned beside her. "Most people couldn't survive what you did, let alone become what you've become." She stared at her reflection in the glass of the viewport. "Sometimes I wonder who I'd be if you hadn't stepped into that market." Elias shook his head. "You're giving me too much credit. You saved me." "No, I freed you." "The saving? You did that yourself." Those words settled into her chest like a steady warmth. Later, as the crew returned to their routines, Elias began programming a new training module when he paused. Jari was sitting at the terminal across from him, reviewing navigation requests from a civilian convoy. She wore a worn but neat Federation uniform jacket, a gift from Elias, tailored to her size. Her posture was composed, her expression sharp. She didn't look like someone who had once been owned. She looked like a commander. "Hey, Jari," he said suddenly. She looked up. "Have you ever thought about what comes next?" "For you, I mean," she tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, folding his arms, "if you wanted to take your own ship someday, start your own crew, set your own mission. You've got the skill, the presence, you could do it." Jari blinked out. It wasn't the offer that stunned her, it was the fact that, for the first time, she didn't dismiss the idea. She wasn't afraid of it. She was capable of it. A slow smile spread across her face. "I'm not done here yet," she said, "but maybe one day." He smiled back. "I'll be proud to serve under you when that day comes." They clinked glasses, the stars outside swirling endlessly past. She had once been nothing in the eyes of a galaxy that saw her as disposable. But now, on this ship, with this crew, and under the mentorship of a human who treated her not like a Sci-Fi Tiffin Wesed with this crew, and under the mentorship of a human who treated her not like a human who treated her not like a Qing pet or a tool but an equal, Jari was far more than a survivor. She was becoming a force of her own. It was Elias who suggested they return to Zarnuk Prime, not for revenge, not to make a statement, but for justice. That the slave markets were under fire. In the months since Jari's liberation, Elias had quietly compiled reports, recordings, testimonies, encrypted financial logs, and intercepted transmissions. Jari had helped. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for exposure, for truth, for an end to the systems that had broken her and so many others. And now, the Federation Tribunal was ready to listen. They arrived in orbit above Zarnuk Prime in a different ship than the one that had once carried Jari away in silence. Valkyrie had been refitted, repainted, and bore the official seal of a Terran diplomatic envoy. Elias wore the dark blue of a formal representative. Jari, tall, composed, dressed in silver-trimmed navy, walked beside him, no longer a shadow, but a force. As they descended toward the capital's tribunal complex, the mood in the air shifted. The slaver syndicates had heard rumors, whispers of a Yulari survivor coming to testify, of a human who had thrown punches and exposed records. And now they had arrived together, side by side. The courtroom was massive, filled with delegates from dozens of world's representatives, officials, media, and more. The slavers were present, sneering behind their council teams, already posturing for dismissal and damage control, and then Jari entered. The room still. She did not tremble. When called, she took the stand and looked into the crowd with steady, unblinking eyes. "I am Jari of House Nelsaran," she began. "I was born a diplomat's daughter. I was stolen, sold, and silenced." She paused, then continued with brutal clarity. "I was chained in markets like this, told I was worth less than a ration pack, beaten for speaking my name, shamed for crying, degraded for amusement. I was made into a thing, a number." Every word cut through the room like a blade. "And yet," she said, her voice stronger now, "I stand here not as a broken survivor, but as proof that your system is a lie, that freedom can't be owned and dignity can't be auctioned." Her testimony lasted over an hour, specific, vivid, undeniable. She had the receipts, the names, the dates, the scars. Elias sat silently behind her the whole time, never needing to speak. His presence alone said enough. She has my backing. And by extension, Earth's. The verdict came quickly. The slave syndicates were dismantled, sanctions imposed, arrests made. The auction square she had once stood in barefoot and bruised was closed by galactic order. But more than that, Jari became something else, a symbol, not of pity but of power reclaimed. When they exited the tribunal, reporters swarmed. The story had already spread. Yulari survivor testifies. Federation moves to abolish Zarnuk trade routes. Amid the noise, a small voice broke through. A young Yulari girl had pushed through the crowd. She couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old. Her robes were clean, but her eyes held the familiar shadows of fear. Jari knelt, smiling gently. The girl whispered, "Is it true? A human rescued you?" Jari reached out, taking the girl's small hands in her own. "No," she said softly. "He didn't rescue me. He reminded me I was never broken to begin with, and I chose to fight back." Behind her, Elias watched quietly, a proud expression hidden beneath his calm demeanor. Later, as the two returned to the Valkyrie, Elias turned to her. "You know what comes next, don't you?" Jari nodded. "I can't stay on the sidelines anymore." He grinned. "Then it's time." She would go on to form her own crew, a diplomatic envoy focused on liberation and justice. Survivors from across the galaxy joined her cause. She called her ship a Seraph's voice. Before departing, Elias handed her a small box. Inside was a captain's insignia custom-made, polished silver and deep blue. Terran in design, but etched in Yulari script. She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," he said. "You became who you were always meant to be." Their hands clasped firm, equal. Then she boarded her ship.